All right, let's jump right in. This is section 2.2. The start thinking part gives a map of an amusement park and then asks various questions about your path or where you would be if you were halfway between two different places. So let's go ahead and go over what the students did in class. Number one says, every day a food truck sets up at a location that is conveniently halfway between the entrance and the exit. Plot the point where the food truck is going to be. So this one was rather easy because they are both on the x-axis. One is 8 to the left and one is 8 to the right. So obviously 0 is going to be the midway point. And I went over and put a point there and called it food truck. The next one says, after getting lunch from the food truck, you decide to head to the milk jug. Give the coordinates of the halfway point. Explain how you know that this is the halfway point. So when we're taking a look at this and you make a line segment going from the 0, 0 at the food truck to the milk jug, there's a few different ways you could do this. You can kind of eyeball it and you could see that 4, -2 is going to be midway along that path. That is one way to do it. Another way students did it was they found out that to go the whole way from the food truck to the milk jug is down by 4, so we'd go down by 2, and then instead of going all the way over by 8, we'd go over by 4, and that's how they found out where the middle point was. So there was various different ways that students were able to do this. The next one asked, are the bumper cars closer to the entrance or to the darts? Explain your reasoning. So they are closer to the entrance because you could see this is over by 4 and down by 3, whereas the other one is also down by 3, but it's over by 5. Now, I do know that you guys know the Pythagorean theorem, and you probably could go over and calculate the exact distance, but we're not doing that in this lesson. So there you go. You could see that the entrance is going to be closer because when we're looking at the 3 and the 4 versus the 3 and the 5, if you did the Pythagorean theorem, you would find out that the Pythagorean theorem with the 3 and a 4 is less of a diagonal than between a 3 and a 5. Okay. The next one says they're creating a sky ride that goes from 18,12 to the lazy pool. There needs to be a brace midway between the sky bridge where it begins and where it ends. Where would this be with your coordinates? Now, the reason I put this problem is because all of the other ones that you've done so far, you could kind of just eyeball and say, this looks like the middle. The point of this is that 18,12 is off of the graph. So you know that you're going from 18,12 to -4,2. And we got to figure out a more efficient way of doing this. One way students did it was they found going from 18 to -4 was going down by 22, and half of that to get to the middle is 11. So they started at 18 and went down by 11. And then going from 12 to 2 is going over by 10. Half of that is 5. So you could have gotten your 12 and taken away 5. That's one way to do it. What the students were able to do, though, other than that way, was they figured that you could actually just average the x's to find the new x and average the y's to find the new y. So that made sense because one was too high and one was too low. One was too far left, one was too far right. And the average between the two would be where the midpoint is going to be. So the next one is the exit is exactly halfway between the Ferris wheel and where you parked your car. Give the coordinates of the parked car. So when we look at this, you could see the Ferris wheel, you can go to the exit, and if you kept going in that direction to get to your car, it's off the graph. So one way students did this is they saw that you had to go over by 6 to get to the exit, so they went over by 6 again. They went down by 7 to get to the exit, so you'd go down by 7 again. And that brought them to 14, -7. The way that you could also do it is going from 2 to 8 is add 6 again. 7 to 0 is down by 7 again. And that'll put you where you're at. You just have to be careful to make sure you're going from the endpoint to the midpoint so that you can keep going in that direction. All right, let's keep on looking. To formalize this, we're talking about a point that is in the middle. The name of that is the midpoint. So the midpoint is going to be halfway between the endpoints of a segment. The formula that we came up with was the average of x's and average of y's. You could think of it as a formula, but I'd rather you just think average and average because some formulas have subtraction in there and you kind of get mixed up if you're trying to memorize the formula. But if you understand you're just averaging, it makes sense to add them and divide by 2. I showed a little visual on the right-hand side that it's half of the x to get to the midpoint and half rest to go to the other endpoint, and then half of the y and then half of the y again. Makes you understand the only reasonable answer for a midpoint is a point. A lot of kids go, oh, the whole distance is 10, so the midpoint must be at 5. And 5 is not a point, so that just makes no sense. Next one says plot the midpoint of AB. So this one you could kind of eyeball it. You could also find out with the vertical change in the horizontal and go halfway, or you could use the formula. Either way, it's going to be 1 1/2. The next one, I'd recommend using the formula for this. You're just averaging your x's and averaging your y's. Remember, a point is x comma y, and you end up getting 6, 1. Give the coordinates of the two endpoints whose midpoint does not have a whole number for x and y. I thought the easiest way to do this is any x's that add to be odd and any y's that add to be odd, or decimals, or fractions. So just, they don't want you to be concerned if you get half of your answer having a fraction in it. It's totally fine. The next one, a lot of students accidentally said 5 going to 2 was subtract 3 and then subtract 3 again, but that's going from the midpoint to an endpoint. You want to go endpoint to midpoint and midpoint to the other endpoint. So you got to make sure you're going in the correct direction here. And you get 8, -11 when you're finding out how much you're having to change the x and the y to get to the midpoint and just doing it again. And then lastly, it says draw 2 segments of different lengths that both have m as the midpoint. And you could see the ones that I did. Now in here it says K is given as the midpoint of CD. If you move 3 to the right and 4 down, or 4 up to get from C to K, from the endpoint to the midpoint, what do you do to get to the other endpoint? You do the same exact thing. 3 to the right, 4 up, and then you would get to the other endpoint. Because getting to the midpoint from an endpoint, you keep doing the same thing to get to the other endpoint because it's in the middle. The next one, what is the midpoint of CD given these 2 points? I just used my formula. Added the x's, divide by 2, add the y's, divide by 2, and careful with negatives. And I got 1, -1. The next one says the formula for the midpoint is as follows. Explain the significance of adding the x's together and dividing by 2. Remember, you're just averaging the x's and averaging the y's. That's what you're doing there. 4, Tommy finds out that CD equals 8. The whole length of the segment is 8. He says that the midpoint is at 4. What's the issue with this? A midpoint is a point. The number 8 is not a point. That just doesn't make any sense. Number 5, you were supposed to give any 2 points where the midpoint would be located at 3, 8. I just gave one example, and that one example is 1, 1 and 5, 15. And then the next one says CD has a midpoint of M. If C is located at -2, 3, and M is located at 4, 5, then where's the other endpoint? Remember, we just see how do you get from the endpoint to the midpoint and then do the same thing. So in this case, it was add 6 and add 2. So I added 6 and added 2 again to find out the other one. You could always go over and find the midpoint using those 2 and make sure that you get 4, 5. And then lastly, what we're going to do here is you're looking at this diagram. This is just a little review. So you are going to be stating which lines are parallel. The only ones we know for sure are parallel. There's some that look like they're parallel. We're not quite sure, but the ones with the arrows on them. So we could say MP is parallel to BR. Which ones are perpendicular? You need to see that right angle marker. So MP and JW are going to be perpendicular, and you could see the symbol. Name the ray in 2 different ways. It's going from P towards T or from P towards K. Those are 2 different ways to talk about that ray. And then lastly, name the segment in the bottom left. Starts at B, goes to H, has a line segment on top. If you wrote BH without the line segment, it'd be talking about the length of the line segment. All right, hopefully that all made sense. Today's lesson was all about midpoint and making sure you know that is just averaging the x's and averaging the y's. Thanks for watching.